Hey, good morning. Are they coming in? Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. As we are letting the Zoom participants come in, I'm going to say good morning to everyone and feel free to get your fingers active in the chat and say hello to us. We'd love to give a shout out to folks that are in the room. So feel free to say hello. For those who I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Holly Prather. I'm the Vice President of the Leadership Louisville Center, and we are so excited and thrilled to have everyone joining us today for our current installment of our Thought Leadership series. We've got an incredible, great speaker and some great content planned for you today. And we're kind of trying out a hybrid model. So we've got some folks here in the classroom with us, and then we have lots of folks on the Zoom. So thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to get started. And the first thing I want to do is thank all of those who are the members of the Leadership Louisville Center. Thank you so much for being with us today. You are part of our leadership network, and you share our belief that leadership is a journey, not to be taken alone. And you also share our belief that leadership, great leaders are lifelong learners. So thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to turn over to my colleague who's running the slides. It's not advancing for me. So thank you so much. So at these events, because there's so many friends with us and our members, we want to make sure you have the latest update on what's happening with the Leadership Louisville Center. So I'm going to share a couple of things that we've got happening that you should know about. One of them is that our amazing Bingham Fellows program, we have just announced the topic for the class of 2022. That class will begin in January, but we are taking applications now through the end of October. And our topic this year is Downtown Moving Forward, Adapt and Reinvent. And I know there are so many community leaders and folks with us today that are very passionate about the success of our community and understand the asset that we have in downtown Louisville. And we have an opportunity. We're at a crossroads. How will we move downtown forward? So if you have a passion for a community and have some great ideas, please consider applying for the program. We have some upcoming information sessions where you can learn more about that program and opportunity. So come hang out with us there. And the next thing we've got coming up is next Tuesday, October 5th, we are hosting our annual Leadership Louisville Luncheon. And we are hosting it at the Norton Healthcare Sports and Learning Center in West Louisville. We have an amazing keynote speaker, the CEO of Track and Field, Max Siegel. And I will tell you that we are about to sell out. We literally have 2 tables left in the room. So if you want to come, you need to get your ticket today because we will likely sell it out by the end of the day today. So that's coming up. And then finally, for those who are in the business of lifelong learning, we have a couple of opportunities coming up in our leadership green room. We've got courses coming up in October and November and December. Come hang out with us. And we also launched our leadership green room micro learning in the pandemic last year. And we have an installment of that coming up in October as well. So we'll share all those details in our follow-up email, but just wanted to keep you in the loop on what's happening with the center and share some opportunities to come hang out with us again. So that brings us to today's event, and it would not be possible without our amazing friends at Baird, who are our presenting sponsor for this event. I'm going to share a short video about this, about Baird, and I'm also going to invite the amazing Jim Allen to come up and help introduce our speaker. Jim Allen is the vice chair of Baird, and we'll watch a short video and then you'll get to meet Jim.
If you're looking for a different type of financial partner, discover Baird. Our culture is founded on integrity, transparency, and teamwork to give you the financial advice you need now and for the next 100 years. Discover the Baird difference. Visit BairdDifference.com.
Good morning and welcome everybody. It's great to have a in-person audience and a virtual audience. So we're all growing very accustomed to the hybrid model. First, I want to say what a pleasure and privilege it is to be part of this program yet again. We're proud sponsors at Baird, which obviously was previously Hilliard Lyons. And we've got deep roots in this community that go back to 1854. So sponsoring this event is really a natural. And of course, we're going to hear from our special guest speaker who has deep Hilliard Lyons and Baird roots. So I like him even more as I've gotten to know him a little bit this morning before we get started here. But again, it really is such a natural for us. I got to tell you how pleased I am that downtown Louisville is going to be the focus for this year's Bingham Fellows program. So when you think about Leadership Louisville and the timeliness and the relevance of their programming, it's always spot on. And I think a focus on downtown is something we really need to feature, going forward. So we've made a big commitment at 500 West Jefferson, have taken the top 5 floors of that building, have invested approximately $25 million, and we will look forward to hosting a Leadership Louisville event when we're ready for showtime over there. But it's great to have that commitment in downtown, and we're excited to see others jump on board and revitalize our downtown, which is so incredibly essential to the vibrance of the region. So that's great. So let me move on now to introduce our guest speaker. And as I indicated, he has deep Hilliard Lyons and Baird roots. In fact, he could probably spend his entire time kind of going through his history on that, but he won't do that today. We'll save it for another program. Dr. Brad Shuck is an internationally recognized scholar and business thought leader in the areas of employee engagement, leadership development, and organizational culture. He is the author of Employee Engagement, a Research Overview, and his work has been featured in U.S.-based international media outlets, including Forbes, The Washington Post, and Time. Brad is a tenured associate professor and program director of the Human Resources and Organizational Development Program at the University of Louisville. He is also the co-founder of Org Vitals, which provides assessment solutions for HR leaders and others responsible for corporate culture. We look forward to hearing more about his research on workplace culture coming out of the pandemic and the 4-step model he developed to help leaders bring employees back to the office. Obviously, incredibly relevant to all of us. Following his remarks, Cynthia Napek from Leadership Louisville will share the latest research on how training and development impact culture. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Brad Shuck on tools for a successful return to work. All right. How about that? It's a standing ovation for those of you who can't see it. That's great, Brad. Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're well. Man, we could not be talking about a more relevant topic right now. Like, everybody is thinking about, all right, what does this look like? How are we going to come back? What does that mean? I'm going to share my screen real quick so you guys can see my deck up here. I am excited to be talking with you about this model that we developed called the RISE model of reintegration. Now, I want to be clear. It would be really easy. Here we go. Boom. It would be really easy to see this as like a cookie cutter approach. And that's not what we have here. It would be it would almost be insensitive to say like, all right, well, here are the 5 steps that you need to take to reintegrate, make sure everything works out really great with your culture. Rather, what I want to do is I want to provide a framework for conversation. What are the things that we need to be thinking about? What are the things that we need to be asking? What's the research telling us about culture right now? So first, I want to say thank you to Leadership Louisville. I want to say thank you to Baird and my friend Jim Allen for sponsoring this. And I'm just incredibly humbled. We've got about 20 minutes to talk through this model today, and then I can't wait to turn it over to Paul to talk a little bit more about culture. If you need more information, I want to encourage you to find me on the socials. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube at Dr. B. Shuck. I keep a pretty active channel there, and we'll be posting about this session later on today. So without further ado, let me jump in here. I see some friends on the Zoom today. Just a big shout out to those guys, and thank you guys for coming. All right, let's dig in. So here's what I think the reality is going to be as we begin to think about reintegration back into work is a lot of folks are going to struggle with culture management. What does it mean? What does it mean now? How do we do hybrid? What does it mean to be remote? What if I'm fully in person? How do I begin to communicate that? And I wrote down a couple of statistics here that I think are really important for us to think about when we're considering culture. Currently, 81% of employees that we've talked with are looking for other opportunities. Doesn't mean they're leaving, but 81% of people in the workforce today are beginning to look at other opportunities. And we've shifted from something called a value proposition to a value promise. And those two things are very different. A value proposition is, here's what is attracting me. This is what makes me want to come here. This is our brand as a corporation, as an organization. A value promise is, are we in this together? Is my expectations being met? Are your expectations being met? Are we meeting in the middle? Is this a place where I can continue to grow and lead and be my best self? So 81% of folks are looking at other opportunities. 46% of those folks cite corporate culture as the number one driving factor in their decision to either stay or leave. About 50%. And Paul's going to talk a little bit about engagement and how we can drive engagement. What I want to begin to think about today is, what's the state? Where are we at right now? So we've been following what's happening in corporate culture for the past 18 to 24 months. We started collecting research on this almost 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, not knowing that we were going to move into a pandemic and we were going to have an opportunity to watch the workforce really fluctuate. Of those that we talked to, 60% of those suggested that they were moderately to chronically stressed. Now, I can ask those in the room and those in Zoom, listen, has work been exhausting in places? Yes, work has been exhausting. Have you been in places where you're like, I don't even know what to do next? Like, I have so many things that I need to do. I don't know what to do. And we don't call that disengagement. We call that distracted. When it's not that I don't want to do the work, I don't know how to do the work. I'm not sure what matters the most, because right now everything is kind of mattering to me. Of those 60% that we talked to, we wanted to know, well, what mitigates that? And here's the reason why. Chronic stress impacts our health. It impacts our sleep. It impacts the way that we show up at home with our families. It impacts the way that we can do work in our community. When we're chronically stressed and chronically exhausted, we don't have as much to give in those other places that we really want to care about. And so there are two anecdotes to that. The first is belonging. The second is purpose. I'm reminded of how powerful belonging is when I put my daughter on the bus in the morning. At 6:44, my daughter, the big yellow bus pulls up and the lights turn on, and she gets on the bus and she looks back and she says, "Bye, Dad, I'll see you later." That's belonging. There's not an expectation there. There's an anticipation. Knowing that I'm supported by my community, knowing that there's going to be people that come back to me, that come into work, that care as much about me as I care about them. And we're kind of in this together. Now, I'm not talking about like mushy stuff, rainbows, unicorns, things like that. I'm talking about three questions. The first is, do I feel supported by my leader? The second, do I feel supported by my coworkers? Those two questions drove whether or not somebody believed they belonged at work or not. And then the second piece of this, purpose and work, was the third question. Is the work that I do here meaningful? And to the degree that people could answer those three questions, I feel supported by my leader, I feel supported by my coworker, and the work that I do here is meaningful, they were able to mitigate that chronic stress. In fact, it wasn't just relational, it was predictive. These two things, belonging and purpose, predicted 41% of the predictive engagement model that we've developed at Org Vitals. Unbelievable. If I told you that I could help move the needle on employee engagement 50% by just focusing on these two things, we would do that. Now, these seem pedestrian though. Belonging and purpose, like, how do we do that? Well, when we're thinking about reintegration and we're thinking about bringing people back to work, there's a framework that we need to use to think about that. We call that framework the RISE model of reintegration. I developed this with my colleagues at the University of Louisville. We've implemented this across the country with all kinds of organizations to really begin to drive conversations around what does it mean to start to think about work in the future. And I'm going to go through each of these, but we're going to go through 4 areas: reset, restart, recalibrate, and reinvent. And let me walk us through what each of those means. So there's no doubt about it that March 2020 had a reset. And guess what? We're having another reset right now. As we see corporations beginning to push back, bringing people back in fully, or we're seeing people pivot into remote work or some kind of a hybrid, right? What needs to happen here is we have to acknowledge that this change is happening, right? And how many of us back in the summertime could have even wrapped our mind around that we would have a second COVID wave? Like, my mind wouldn't even allow me to go. I survived the first wave. A second wave, I thought, summer, we're free and clear. This is all good. We're going to be back in the fall. Like, everything's going to be okay. This is about resetting. Now, this is about, most importantly, what needs to happen before we go back. What is the plan? What is the process? All of the things that we need to be talking about. Now, I'm not just talking about like the physical plan, like how we do that, but how are we going to help people navigate? How are we going to help people cope? How are we going to help folks think through in-person meetings or hybrid meetings? What's the technology that we need? The other thing I think we need to do, and I'm going to use a word very intentionally here, and that is to extend ourselves some grace. And that means resetting expectations. So for some of us, those expectations were really high. That stress got really chronic. That exhaustion got really real. I remember a few nights my wife would come upstairs in the office and say, "Hey, you gonna stop working today? It's 8:30. Oh, yeah, okay. So not only do we need to reset expectations inside organizations, but maybe we need to reset those expectations with ourselves. It's not about just how much work gets done, but it's about how that work gets done. When we talk about compassion, we talk about the ideas of dignity and presence. Is my work embedded with dignity? It's not about how much, it's just as important to think about how that work gets done. And then again, it's not about just physically getting ready. Now you need to think about that. All right, what are the physical things? Do I need to go in and like test all the technology and turn all the water faucets on, make sure the pipes don't blow up if we bring everybody back? But we need to think about that mentally and emotionally as well. Oh, let me say one more thing. We do have some time frames associated with this. So we suggest that you begin to think about resetting 2 to 3 months before physically bringing employees back or making a decision between hybrid, remote, whatever that might be. When it comes to restart, this is about day one and through the first 1 or 2 months back. This is how are we going to do things? What are the cultural norms that we need to begin to define again? What is it about our culture that is a value promise, not just a value proposition, but how are we delivering on that? What are the technology needs that we have? What's the social interaction going to look like? Most importantly, what are the milestones? How do we mark the important things that are going to happen within our culture? How are we going to meet? What does recognition look like? We've got to be thinking about how we reset in a very purposeful and a very meaningful way. This is about intentionality. This is about having these conversations, not just with your leadership team. Like, please don't miss this piece, because I've seen this all over the country. They're very well-intentioned folks who will make decisions that are going to cascade down throughout their organization without ever talking to the people who those decisions are actually going to impact. And we've seen this in a variety of different industries across the country. My recommendation here, my strong recommendation here, is that you pull a group of people together that's representative of the impact of the decisions that are going to be made within the organization, and you ask them, what do you think about these? How could we do this better? Is there anything that we're missing? Is there anything that we're not seeing? We're not saying I don't know it all. We're saying, how do we include everybody? If we go back to that belonging and purpose piece, this helps people feel like they're a part of, and they're connected to the culture that's being shaped in the future. The third piece here is recalibrating. This is 2 to 6 months after returning. This is about taking a real hard look at market conditions. There's no question that every industry on every continent across the globe has been impacted by this. There's no question that market conditions are a little bit different. We need to take stock in that, think about it. How do we need to pivot? What do we need to do? How do we make adjustments? And then recalibrating those expectations based on those market conditions. I think we also need to ask more human-centric questions around, what does stress look like here? What's a reasonable level of stress? What's a reasonable level of engagement? What's a reasonable level of capacity? What's a reasonable level of mental wellness? How do we define those experiences within our organization? How do we rethink culture in a way that supports the values we need going forward? That's a value promise, not a value proposition. How do we rethink that culture in a way that supports the values? And that's why I can't give you a 5-step plan, because every corporation's value promise and values are going to be a little bit different. We have to think through those things. We have a unique opportunity to leverage this new beginning to create something incredibly unique within our organizations. And then the fourth and the last piece here is, how do we take what we've learned from 2021 and lean into a positive forward? This is reinventing, and this is 6 to 12 months after returning. And we might even push this out to 18 months. But this is all about, how do I reinvent our values? How do I, again, think about well-being, belonging, emotional capacity, feeling like I'm connected? And how do we create a community, right, where I belong, where I'm a part of? And what are the expectations? What are the questions that I need to be asking around bringing people back? Now, again, this is a framework. My hope is that these 4 areas can help you think through how you can help people see that purpose in their work, how they belong. And those things, to be clear, like, the research is really clear on this. These things drive engagement. Like, these things drive performance. These things drive collaboration. These things drive mission alignment. When people feel like they're a part of and they're in a community, they feel supported by their leader, they feel supported by their coworker, and they know that the work that they do every day has meaning and purpose to it, they're more likely to lean into that positive future. That's a value promise. So as a leader, what can you do? 4 quick things before I turn it over to Paul to talk a little bit more about what you can do to really drive culture and leverage Leadership Louisville and the resources that they have here. The first is, I would encourage you to lead with data. Listen, if you're flying blind, you're hoping it works out, you're at a significant disadvantage. I would encourage you to lead with information, lead with data that you can trust. The second is to build in moments. I would encourage you to think about, when you bring folks back, what are the moments that are going to really mark and define that experience of culture? Is it an all hands on, and maybe everybody's masked up, or maybe we do something virtual, everybody's in their office? Maybe we think about having something outside where we celebrate where we are now. We acknowledge the past, but we lean into that positive future. The third is to give space. Some folks are going to need space. The day that my wife went back to school to teach was a sad day for me. I mean, I had been with my family for 18 months. And then I was like, all of a sudden the house was quiet. Now, I got a lot of work done that day, right? But I was sad in that moment. People are going to have a variety of different emotions. And the fourth thing I would encourage you to do is to build a plan with a gradient. And what I mean by that is a slow ramp up. This allows people to ease into a plan versus a hard stop or a hard start. Those can feel abrupt and abrasive. And so you might think about building out a plan where you might have people back in the office on a Tuesday or a Friday. And then you build in maybe more days, or maybe we allow remote, we do more hybrid. We think about, what are the options? Again, this is going to be unique to every organization. So I would encourage you to think about the values and the value promise that you're driving today through that organization. With that, I want to wrap it up. Again, here's how you can find me on the socials. And with that, I want to bring my colleague Paul up to talk a little bit more about culture and engagement and how you can drive that here at Leadership Louisville.
All right. Wait for my slides. All right. So thank you, Brad. And my name is Paul Bolton. For those that don't know me, I'm the Director of Business Development here at the Leadership Louisville Center. And I'm going to try to make sure eye contact here, eye contact to you all at home. So thanks for joining us today. All right. As Brad just said, leading with data. According to the Achievers Workforce Institute 2021 survey, look at this: 46% of employers are feeling less connected and to their companies, and then 42% said their company culture diminished. And I think I'm just going to let those sit for a second. I think those are numbers that we have to acknowledge. Acknowledgement is the first step to moving forward. So once we acknowledge, then we have to address that. So how do we keep our teams from being disconnected and disengaged? It's a loaded question. All right. Well, the number one factor holding back engagement, lack of career growth. I don't think that that's new to some of us, but I think it's been escalated and elevated. And in recent, Forbes had an article that came out. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on LinkedIn. We'll share it if anyone needs that link. It's a great article. Developing your employee, the key to retention. So 4 smart ways to start. So definitely check that out. But that lack of career growth right there at the top, feeling unappreciated for their contributions. Again, I feel like I'm repeating just everything that Brad just said right there. And relationships with the manager, and then just not listening to the feedback. That's huge. Or acting on the feedback. That's that like pseudo type management that we've heard plenty about in the past. And then just a lack of trust. And trust is going to be key for all those elements. And that lack of trust of the leadership. So we're not just talking coworkers, it's lack of trust of leadership. And I think with those other things lacking, then trust is an obvious thing to follow. All right, so big fan of Gallup here at the Leadership Louisville Center, and Q12 survey. That's an employee engagement survey for those that are new to that verbiage, Q12. But if we look there at the top, how do we grow and do I belong? So they break those up into 4 sectors right there of those key areas of engagement. And so how do we grow? And if that is not very transparent, it's going to be difficult to drive that engagement. Employees might not be leaving, but just as Brad has said, the percentages of people that are looking to leave is very high. So those are things. Do I belong? And that's a question that I think that we're always constantly asking ourselves in general, but in the workplace that maybe we felt like it 18 months ago, and maybe right now we're starting to question that a little bit more. All right. So investing in your employees and is going to benefit yourself, benefit the employee, benefit the organization, but also the community. Now, this is what I'm going to call the triple win. All right. So you have that individual, organization, community. So what is that? So for like at Leadership Louisville, we're aware that there's options to train your employees. We understand that. We know that there's things out there that your fingertips, especially with technology. But like we are here to do that stuff. Like that's why we show up every day here at Leadership Louisville Center to assist you all. And this is the time where if we weren't your best friend, if we were like your acquaintance in the past, like it's the BFF time. So we want to be your partner. We're looking to be your partner through this. Again, like we live for this stuff. So that's why I'm here. That's why all my great coworkers are here. So your investment in your employee and your investment in them also is going to tie into the community. We have our community acceleration teams, our community leadership programs, and we do a lot of work with nonprofits. So when you invest in your individual and the organization here at the center, we take that and we pay it forward with our work in strategic consulting with a lot of the nonprofits in the area. So some of that support is also going to support others and outside and have a good residual impact for the community. It's also a great way to network and have your people in a classroom and in a setting with people from other organizations, other backgrounds. So it's a diverse learning experience with curriculum that's designed to make you a better boss, make you a better employee, and overall win-win for the organization that definitely dips into the community. Leadership development for your organization. So what do we here at the Leadership Louisville Center, like we have courses and we have opportunities. These are solutions. And one of those solutions is our leadership green room. We're here to assist, and we have those like open enrollment classes that we have, and we'll share those. And I know that those that are members and some of those familiar names I see that have attended some of these can definitely speak to some of those green room courses. But we also take our training in our organization and the green room to you as well in our talent development solutions. Now more than ever, with culture being important, and some of the teams just getting back together, it's a great way for us to be able to bring your team together and work not just on the individual in a green room course, but work with an entire team. Here at the center, we can do it virtually, and then we can do it at your organization. So that's an opportunity. You can contact me. In fact, like just shoot me an email today, pbolton@leadershiplouisville.org. And let's just have a conversation about some of the things that right now that you're seeing, maybe the impact that this communication today has had on you, and maybe some of your team, and let's just have a conversation. So just reach out to me and we'll get kind of started with that. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Brad. Really amazing information this morning. And we are now going to set some time to have some Q&A with our folks that are on the Zoom and in person. And I believe someone that is here had a question, but I'm going to start with a question from Tiffany Cardwell. And that is, culture is a key factor for business success. Could Brad share what he's found to be great resources online or subscription that provide great insights on culture? So I'm going to invite Brad to come up, answer that question, and we'll take some others. Feel free to put them in the chat.
So big shout out to Tiffany, good friend. Thank you, Tiffany, for asking a question. I appreciate that. Let me say one thing really quickly before I dive into Tiffany's question. When we say belonging, I think there's a really important point we need to make here. Belonging is about whether or not I feel like my voice is heard in an organization. And this dovetails into really, really critical questions that organizations are having right now around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look, I've been in places where they've got ping pong tables and cereal bars and free beer in the refrigerator and all of the great perks that you could possibly imagine. If you don't feel like you can raise your hand in a meeting and somebody hear you, those things do not matter. You have got to get that piece right. Otherwise, belonging is not about cereal bars and ping pong tables. It's about the human beings in the room and them believing that their voice matters, that there's equity at the table. And diversity is different from inclusion and equity. Inclusion and equity is the hard work of diversity. And so I want to encourage anyone listening to lean into those voices in the room who you may not have historically or traditionally heard from, and bring them into the conversation in a way that they know they are valued and they belong. So with that, Tiffany asked a really good question. What are some online resources? So here's what I would encourage everybody to do. If you want to know more about culture management or culture, go to Google, type in what is culture management. This is kind of a new and emerging field, and read through some of those resources. SHRM is beginning to develop a really great repository on resources, and we are curating a lot of information at Org Vitals. If you want to know more about kind of what we're doing at Org Vitals to really drive conversations around culture management, just reach out to me and let me know. But I would encourage you to just begin to learn more about, like, what is this idea of culture management? And culture management is more than your annual employee engagement survey. Employee engagement for many, many years has been the gold standard. But sometimes people can be engaged and stressed at the same time. And so we have to look a little bit deeper into the nuances of what's driving culture. How do people feel like they can raise their hands in meetings? Are they aligned to mission? Is there a sense of morale? What does it look like here to be in terms of health outcomes? And so we would never go to a doctor in April and they knock our knee a couple of times and go, "Hey, you're good. Everything's, have a big time. See you guys. We'll see you in another month." No, they do blood work and they ask us a series of questions. And they'll knock on a couple of things and they'll poke here and they'll listen here. And we need to be doing the same things with culture. We're trying to solve a multi-dimensional problem with a one-dimensional approach, and that's just not going to work. So what I think we need to do is to begin to think about what are the nuances of culture that matter in your organization? How do we capture information around those nuances and give it back to you? How do we capture that information, learn from it, and then empower you to lead with that information in a way that helps you build a culture that everyone can lean into?
Thank you, Brad. And there was another question from someone who's in the room with us today. So I'm going to invite David. He's got a mic to ask his question. You won't see him on the camera, but you'll hear him.
Thanks. Good morning, Brad. So tactically, when you were talking about how we solve some of these problems, you had mentioned that executive leaders should lead with data. So what are some trusted data sources? And then how do they kind of interpret that data?
Yeah. So my recommendation is, if you don't have someone in-house that does culture management for your organization, that you reach out and partner with somebody to do that. Here in Louisville, there are lots of really great places to partner. There's Leadership Louisville, there's Org Vitals, there's the University of Louisville, there's lots and lots of other consulting groups around that may be able to help you do that. So if you don't have someone, reach out to someone who you trust, who you feel is reputable in the area of culture management. So they're not the one or unidimensional problem solver, but we're looking at this from a multifaceted perspective. Data is an interesting conversation because, and I won't get too nerdy in the psychometrics and the statistics here, but if I'm an organization and I'm asking my employees to take a survey, or I'm asking them to take a series of indices around stress and health and engagement and morale, I want to know that information has two things to it. It's reliable and it's valid. So not only does it do what I say it does over time consistently, just like your car battery, we would never use an unreliable car battery. We would go get a new battery, right? Like, you don't hope your car works when you start it. You want it to work. That's called reliability. And then validity is, does it do what we say it's going to do? And this is where we can kind of confound and conflate some things with, like, engagement. Like, satisfaction and engagement are qualitatively different experiences. I can be satisfied, satiated, right, but not engaged, right? And so if I'm satiated, that's status quo, where engagement, I think, is leaning forward. And so you want to make sure that not only are the instruments you're using reliable, but they're also valid. And there's ways to check for that. If you're using a vendor, I would encourage you to ask questions around that and see what they say. Hopefully they're really transparent about that. And then if you, of course, if anybody ever has any questions, please reach out to me, let me know, and I'll be happy to help you through that. Yeah, great question, man.
And we have one more from another audience member.
Great, Brad, great presentation. Really big believer in culture. And I actually wanted to make a comment before I asked the question. So when we look at the Hilliard-Lyons-Baird merger and how successful it's been, it's a reflection of corporate cultures that were just very much aligned, very people-centric, respect for people, and across the board. And so, it was a very compelling business model. When you put them together, the culture is what has made it go.
Yeah.
And in the absence of that, it wouldn't have been as successful. So again, big believer in what you're talking about and the data that you've shared. My question now is, as we look at this data and interpret it, and of course, in the context of a very tight labor market, talk about the impact of that on the data that you shared. To what extent is that reflected in here at all? And also, how do you see things going forward as it relates to culture? Probably even raises the bar even more, but I'll defer to you on that. Yeah,
Jim, I think you're absolutely correct on that. I think culture now is becoming a differentiator, and it's a leverage for attracting the kind of talent that we need in our organizations. And so, when people work for a place where they feel like that they can really be themselves, they engage, they can belong, they can raise their hands in those meetings, they see alignment to the mission, there's deep purpose in their work, they tend to lean into that culture. They also tend to stay. Employees who suggest that they work in places like that are about 75% more likely to stay with an organization over time with those who don't work in places like that. So it's absolutely a differentiator for sure. And to your point, like, how that gets driven is it's organic throughout the organization, and it's the gel that holds everything together. There's no doubt about it. We come up against sometimes where people go, well, corporate culture stuff, we'll work on that later. No, it's happening right now. If you're not intentionally working on it right now, it's building itself. You're just not looking at it. And so again, that's why I say data, and to do this in cycles and take a look at this and interpret that information in a way and share that information back with folks in a way that helps them see, gosh, how do I collaborate here? How do I make meaning here? How do I belong here? Yeah. Complete differentiator. Thank you, Jim. Yeah.
We have another question from an audience member.
So I'm kind of behind you, Brad. Sorry.
How
It's
you doing?
Aaron. So the Bingham Fellows program, which Jim we talked about at the very beginning, is looking at downtown and kind of the future of downtown. And all of this, as work culture changes, it impacts the number of bodies physically coming into offices. And so we've been digging into research because it's not going to come back 100%, maybe not even ever. What are you hearing, or what is your research showing? Like, what percentage of people are going to be in-person hybrid? How is that going to long-term impact culture and the cities and the spaces where people show up to go to work? I mean, we don't need the big office building if only half the people are going to be coming to work every day. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways. So I think a large majority of organizations will have some kind of hybrid option. There are some industries that can't have that. So for example, if I fly airplanes for UPS, like I can't work remote till we get drone technology in those planes, right? If I work supply chain, I can't drive my truck remote. I can't stock grocery shelves remote. I can't do some of those things. Restaurants, it's difficult to do that remote hybrid as well. But I do think for the large majority of folks who pre-March 2020 had people coming into an office to sit at a desk within a cube or within an office space, my encouragement would be that they begin to think about hybrid options. There are some people that want to come back in full time. And that's great. That's terrific. There are other folks that love the flexibility of being able to work on some kind of a flex schedule. Yeah, that's terrific too. That's all right. And every corporation is going to be a little bit different about that. Now, your second question is one I've thought a lot about, in particular here in Louisville. And I may go off the rails here just a little bit, so just reel me back in. I think you're right. I think downtown and downtown spaces across the country are going to look very different in the next decade. I wonder how we can reclaim and reuse resources to help solve problems in our city that have historically been challenges for us. Things like food inequities or homelessness or green space. And I wonder how we repurpose those spaces in ways that help solve some of those challenges, that give everybody a sense of dignity and everybody a sense of equity. I'd love to see us really think about how we transform our downtown spaces to be vibrant communities of human beings that are thriving in a community and that are connected and that come to visit and be a part of. But I think, I hope that we're able to take a look at those resources that we've got and think deeply about how we reuse, reclaim, and connect with communities that are asking to be connected with. It's a great question here.
Yeah, Brad, Chad Dorr.
Hey, Chad.
Thank you for the framework. So the question that I have is, what would you say to the organizations? Because as I hear your framework, it's very methodical. It was thought out. It seems to be patient. What would you say to the organizations that returned to the physical building as quickly as possible with the mindset that we'll kind of figure this out as we go? And didn't necessarily communicate expectations. And again, just there's not a manual for this, so we're figuring it out. What would you say to the organizations that would have loved to gone back 2 or 3 months and set those expectations?
I would say start today. If you can start in the next 10 minutes, that would be amazing. And I would send a note I would start by sending a note that says, thank you. Hey, I want to recognize that, man, we pivoted out really quickly and we pivoted back really quickly and we haven't missed a beat. And I just want you to know how much you're appreciated. I just want to say thank you. That goes such a long way with folks. And I know it sounds pedestrian. Like, I was just suggesting we send thank you notes to everybody. I dare you to try it. I dare you today to send a note to 3 or 4 people that you've been meaning to connect with and say, hey, I've noticed that you've been really humming. You've been hitting on all cylinders. I just want to say thank you. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be long and drawn out, just a quick thank you. Here's what's going to happen. Not only is that unexpected on their end, and is it going to change the trajectory of how they're thinking about their day? I'm telling you, it will also change the trajectory of how you're feeling about your day as well. Gratitude goes a long way in these spaces. But I would begin to implement this plan now. So we may not be able to think about how do we prepare for people to come back, but we can begin to have conversations about, okay, we're back now. What is the kind of culture that we need to be intentionally and meaningfully creating? What are the milestones that we need to set? What are the points of recognition that we need to be talking about? Okay, how have market conditions changed? I think it's really important for us to really take a wide view of how the value promise has changed, not only for our employees, but for our customers as well. And why are they going to different places, or are they going to different places? And if so, why? And begin to think about how those market conditions can then shift the conversations we need to have about. Again, I think we're at a pivotal point where we can start talking about, like, man, people were really exhausted here, prior to March 2020, or man, during the pandemic, we got a lot of work done, but people were really kind of disconnected. How do we begin to talk about what's an acceptable level of stress? Is burning, if a candle had 3 wicks to it, would we burn all 3 of them at the same time? Or is it okay for us to have rest and repite sometimes? Engagement naturally has an ebb and flow to it. I've never been in a boardroom where a CEO has said, hey, look, we are too engaged. We're too profitable. We're too fast. We're too quick. We innovate too much. Can you just help us throttle back a little bit? Nobody has ever said that to me. Everybody wants more and more and more and more. Can I get more? I want 100% engagement. I want 100% alignment. I want 100% of morale. As human beings, there's a natural ebb and flow to how that happens. And I can be fully engaged in a project, right? And just absolutely in flow and loving life right now. But then there's a need for me to come back down and to rest and to take a breath. And then for many of us, particularly folks who are in healthcare right now, particularly folks who are customer facing, particularly folks who are transportation, logistics, supply chain, man, they ramped up in 2020 and they never slowed down. Those folks are tired. They're physically tired and they're emotionally tired. I think the challenge for the leaders of those organizations is, how will you help people feel rest emotionally, physically, and socially? And I think it's a significant challenge that a lot of industries right now are beginning to face. And shout out to teachers, right? I mean, huge shout out to teachers for the work that they do, and the bus drivers who drive those buses. Thank God for bus drivers. Thank God for teachers. Those people are tired. And so we have to find ways to help those folks rest and feel like they're connected and they belong. That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Brad, we have time for one more, and this was posted via direct message. So Katrina Harmon's question: if 80% of people are looking for other job opportunities, and if culture is a key differentiator and predictor of engagement, what is your best advice to candidates in determining whether or not an organization is a good fit for them? And we will close with this question.
That's an insider question. So that's a great question. My advice, was it Katrina?
Katrina Harmon.
Katrina, it's a great question. Thank you. My advice is to pay attention to everything. Pay attention to the way people interact with each other. Pay attention to the way folks answer the phone. Pay attention to how long it takes them to get back to you. Pay attention to all the little nuances and all the little details. And my advice to you would be, if you see a red flag, pay attention to that. Just interrogate. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It means to interrogate it, right? Like, I want to know more about this. I want to know, I need to ask questions in my interview that help me get at the heart of this. I would also ask questions about culture. What does it mean to be really engaged here? What does it look like to really kind of connect and dig in? What does that look like? But my advice to you would be to pay attention to everything. One of the things that that I try to pay attention to on the employer side of the house is how people treat. So I'm a faculty member at the University of Louisville. How people treat our staff members when they show up for an interview. Are they rude? Are they inconsiderate? Is there a sense of entitlement and expectation? And if that's the case, this is not the place for you, because we don't put up with that here. That's not going to fly here for a very long time. You're going to learn very quickly that you're going to want to be at a different place. And so we pay attention to all those little interactions and how people are connecting. Work and culture is so much about the human connection. It is very much about how we think about our work, but culture is so much more about how we feel about our work today, yesterday, and in the future. And with that, I'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone on the Zoom, and thank you to everyone who's here in person. And there were so many things that, came up as you were talking and with Paul's presentation. And I'm just really excited to that companies are paying attention to this. That is one of I like to look at the gifts of the pandemic, because I'm an optimist at heart, and there's so many opportunities for us to reset. And thank you for all of that data. We've welcomed a few new team members to the Leadership Louisville Center team in the past 2 weeks, which has been a crazy time for us, but we're so excited to have them. And I hope that we are modeling all of the principles that we talk about in our programs. And there were a couple of things when you answered that last question. We all want to have good bosses. I loved that stat from Paul's presentation. And we all also want to feel like we're part of something bigger. And I'm really grateful that at the Leadership Louisville Center, we provide those opportunities and also help people be those better bosses and help them drive the purpose of organizations. So thank you for all of that. It's a great synergy with what we do and what you're doing. And we're excited to have everyone with us and hope to see you for the next one. Thank you, Baird. Thank you, everyone here, and hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.